Good morning, everybody. My name is Tristan Smith, and today my colleagues and I are going to be discussing a history lesson plan that we put together about four of the Mesoamerican civilizations, the Maya, the Inca, the Olmec, and the Aztec, and we're calling it an exploration of ancient Latin American civilizations. So here you can see our lesson objectives. The first one is developing and understanding a timeline regarding each of the four ancient Latin American civilizations that we focus on in this lesson plan, as well as identifying and discussing cultural characteristics of each of those four Mesoamerican civilizations that we cover in this lesson plan. Next slide. And here you can see a little bit more information about the lesson plan that we put together. So as mentioned before, it's a history lesson. It's focusing on those four Mesoamerican civilizations. The grade level that we want to focus on here is high school, and this can be designed from grades 9 through 12. And as you'll see in just a moment, it actually can be planned for other grade levels as well. Prior knowledge for this lesson plan would require a knowledge of the geography of North, South, and Latin Americas, but no prior knowledge of these Mesoamerican civilizations. And it will transcend between history and geography. So a couple of notes to the teachers who are watching this, some of our other colleagues. Plan length and days as far as the lesson plan itself. It can be planned over 1 to 2 class sessions. And our thought process here was to cover the first 2 civilizations and then move into the next 2 while completing activities and homework in between before the students are given a presentation assignment to complete. You can see the technology tools integrated into this lesson, which is going to be using Smart Notebook, which is what we use here, and then online research tools. And 3 of the state standards for Colorado that are addressed. The first is evaluate continuity and change over the course of world history. The second is investigate causes and effects of significant events throughout world history. And the third is to describe and analyze the historical development and impact of the arts and literature on the cultures of the world. So we're going to discuss how those are covered in this lesson plan as well. And then to adapt this lesson plan to other grade levels, the content of the lesson can just be adjusted. Some of the assignments can be reduced or taken away as far as like length of papers, and the topics required on the presentation can be changed as well. And then the information that's relevant to the standards of those specific grade levels can be designed around this lesson plan with different expectations. Next slide. Here you can see an example of how we would begin the lesson plan with our students. So this would be like a sample slide that we would put up on the board to really introduce them to this topic and let them know what we're going to be discussing. This one specifically is going to be talking about the entire lesson plan with a focus on the Olmec in the beginning. Next slide. And again, you can see some of our learning objectives. So during those class periods, we're going to discuss the timeline overall of all 4 of those Mesoamerican civilizations, as well as some of their defining characteristics. Students are going to complete those activities and play games that we've designed as well, which you'll see in this slideshow, such as matching games, quizzes, and a Jeopardy game, which 2 of our colleagues have designed. And then they'll use that information from this lesson to complete that poster and present it to their peers in class. Next slide. Here we have an example of a video that could be played during class sessions. This one is specifically about the Olmec, but these YouTube videos can be embedded into Smart Notebook slides to show students. This one here is brief. It's about 3.5 minutes long, and it covers a little bit of information that will give them an idea of what culture they're going to be learning about as we engage them with those 4 Mesoamerican civilizations. Next slide. Here's an example of the timeline. So as you can see, we put the line right across, and for the first lesson plan, the Olmec is going to be the oldest of those Mesoamerican civilizations. So we focus specifically on their timeline, which was from 1600 BCE to 350 BCE, and then change the color of the timeline for each of the other 3 Mesoamerican civilizations, just to show you where they are in respect to the Olmec civilization. Next slide. And here's an example of some of the defining characteristics that we'll be covering. For the Olmec civilization, you have information such as they were the first major civilization in modern-day Mexico. They were located along the Gulf of Mexico in what is known today as Tabasco and Veracruz. The Olmec is the Aztec word for the rubber people. And to the left, you can see a picture of a rubber tree. And that name was given to them because they're one of the first civilizations to utilize the latex from rubber trees, and they traded rubber throughout Mesoamerica. But the Olmec are best known for carved stone or carved statues, which use basalt and were to commemorate their rulers. They're also known for having animal gods, for their monumental sacred complexes, and for drinking chocolate. So when we give these characteristics, we'll go a lot more in depth in the lesson plan, giving students more information, teaching them how to properly take notes on the key points that we're laying out so that they can tie those cause and effect relationships. You can see the characteristics of the Olmec and then relate those to the civilizations that came after them, the Maya, the Inca, and the Aztec. Next slide. And here's an example of what students should focus on for their presentation. So their focus should be on, what was the timeline of when the Olmec existed? How did they influence the other Mesoamerican civilizations, as we discussed on the previous slides? And what were some of the key characteristics that defined that Olmec civilization? Those same concepts will be applied across the board for the Aztec, the Maya, and the Inca as well. And then a few ideas for student projects. They will want to include a timeline on their presentation showing, kind of similar to what we did on that previous slide, where the civilizations that they're discussing line up with the other ones, what time frame they existed in. Use art and images to emphasize the characteristics of the Olmec, such as the pictures that you see depicted on these slides, and then display their understanding of the Olmec influence on those future Mesoamerican civilizations by tying them together, taking those characteristics, comparing them to the characteristics of those future Mesoamerican civilizations, and showing that cause and effect relationship and how those civilizations impacted one another on a larger scope in world history. Next slide. And here we're going to have an example of one of the activities that we designed for our students, and that's this monster quiz. So the monster quiz, when you go in there, it's going to show you some questions, and what the students are going to do is they're going to answer the questions. This specific quiz is about the timeline itself, and it covers all 4 of the Mesoamerican civilizations we're discussing in this lesson plan. When they answer the questions correctly, their monster egg begins to hatch. So it's a way to engage the students, get them a little more interested in the content that we're providing in the lesson plan. And with this, we also have a Google Forms quiz designed that has not the same concept as far as like the animation that's involved, but it allows the students to practice answering those questions so that they gain a deeper understanding of the content that's being provided in the lesson plan. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Maribel.
Yeah, so just like the Olmec, they're going to be going over the Mayans, which is the next civilization on the timeline. On the Mayans, it's more of like the architecture that they had, and that's what Mayans were most recognized for and remembered for. If you could go into the next slide, Aubrey. So fine ruins, they're most popularly known for the limestone structures and the faces with lime clay that they would create. So here students can have more of that focus on presenting images of what the structures look like, what architectures they created, and the tombs that were encased within or beneath the Maya sculpture structures. So this is where students will just be more focused on the images and probably more of an explanation. If you could go into the next slide. They Mayans also did ceremonies that included sacrificing chicken or other small animals as part of their rituals and as part of what they believed in. So here again, students will just go into depth with these descriptions, just because showing some of these images could be a little gruesome to some of them. So just kind of going into further depth and of an explanation of what the Mayans did, what they constructed in those structures, and the rituals that they followed by throughout the time that they were around. Yeah.
And then, similar to the other 2 and the next one, it's going to be for the Aztecs, some fun facts that they could include or do research on. It's located in the area that's now central Mexico. Examples of what the clothing would be like. One of the last great civilizations before European invasion, just because the Aztecs and the Incans were around the same time. Kind of what gods they worshipped. And then like their culture, stuff like that is important to highlight on their poster board presentations. And then I kind of just gave an example of what their poster could look like. Obviously, they can choose to do it online or they can actually get the poster board and go old school. They can just do fun facts, make sure to include the geography, the timeline, and anything that they think would be important to present. What did they wear? What were traditions? Where did they get their food? And then always remember when they are resourcing information to, I usually say like put your caps on. So you want to make sure it's current. You want to make sure it's in the past 10 years. Who's it by? You want to check what the person or the website that put it out is, and then your perception of it. Do you understand it completely, or are you just copy and pasting information? And then do other websites or resources support the same information that you're getting? I also included the textbook, the library are good resources, and you can always look at like National Geographic or the BBC, anything like that. Um, Another idea for an exit ticket to class is this way you can gather the information that you need, what group numbers, what people are in which groups, and what they're doing in a fun way. And then, just like Tristan had said, we put the timelines on here so that the students can be reminded of where they are in the history. And then with that, I will go to Michael.
All right. So for the Inca civilization, very similarly to the other ones, just like these are just gonna have some things to include in their projects. These little pictures right here, these are more or less just some interpretations of what people believe the Incas, kind of how they dress and how they look like. Usually these were interpreted from Spanish conquistadors. So yeah, just some little things to include picture wise. There's not a lot of pictures, obviously, that interpret them, so it's going to be kind of hard to find, but these are just some examples. Next, you can go to the next slide. This is some examples of some art that they should include in their projects. What they were very known for, like their statues, created a lot of statues. And then some questions that they should ask when making a lot of their projects. What did they create? Who did they create? What was the purpose for these creations? Things like that. The things that they should ask themselves before they, or during their research rather, and during their projects. And obviously including lots of pictures of each of their artwork. And then you go to the next slide. And then just some other things like geography is very important. Similarly, again, to the other civilizations, we want to touch on not just the history, but the geography. Where were they located throughout South America, things like that. And talking about kind of how the Mayan civilization, how they had all their ruins and stuff. The Inca has their ruins as well. Including pictures of that is very important. And yeah, that's about it for the Incas.
And then this is just kind of like our sources and acknowledgements page, just kind of giving students an example while also citing our own sources for all the pictures and the resources that we did use online.
Yeah, so in conclusion, kids will as a teacher, you will be going over these ancient civilizations with them in more depth and explaining to them key points and key images that they can include in their presentation. After the days that you present this, they will be going over a quiz, and throughout from the quiz, you have some questions in that Jeopardy game that we'll be showing. In the Jeopardy game, it will be more inclusive, and kids will be able to see more information on there, like what the civilizations were known for, the important dates that they should remember, and all of this can be added onto that quiz. You can switch it up if you would like, but ultimately, all of this information is just the information that kids should be putting on those poster boards that they'll be doing at the end.
Okay, so this is just a little thing we can wrap this up with is our little Jeopardy game that we have. Each category is broken up into the four civilizations that we did, the Mayan, Incan, Olmec, and Aztec. Based off each question is going to be different depending on, I guess, the difficulty of each question. Just for an example, Mayan for 100, where were the Mayans located? And you can move this little thing here, and then it says Mexico, Central America. If you click this button, it'll take us back to the Jeopardy board, I think. And yeah, the students can have the ability to choose whichever civilization they want. It's just kind of a fun little game. You can like give them points for it, and then you can maybe give them a prize, for whatever group of students gets the most answers correctly. And then obviously it's based off of how many points that are made. So yeah, just a fun little game for them to talk about, and that's about it.
Awesome.